Hey, if you're running a manufacturing operation in Indiana, the way that this state is making electricity is changing faster than most people could even realize. Coal now provides about 42% of Indiana's power, which is down from more than 80% a decade ago. While natural gas and large scale solar projects are climbing. And at the same time, the federal government is forcing aging coal plants in Wheatfield and Warrick County to stay online under emergency orders. You're also seeing NIPSCO plan a 2,300 megawatt gas build at Schahfer to serve Amazon data centers, and Duke is leaning into a record breaking capital plan. So, in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through what's actually being built, what's being kept online, and why, and how all of that should really play into your long term energy cost and reliability plans. And if you don't have them, why you absolutely should. So, look, if your facility depends on Indiana's grid, and if you're located here, well, it likely does, the shift from coal toward natural gas and solar, plus new data center demand, will shape your costs and your sustainability story for the next 10 years at least. Coal supplied about 42% of Indiana's net generation in 2024, down from over 80% 10 years ago. By 25, the mix was roughly 44.9% coal and 36.2% natural gas and about 9.4% wind, a little over 6% solar. Indiana ranked sixth in the country for industrial electricity sales, with industrial load representing around 43% of total in state consumption. This is an industrial grid first. On the renewable side, Durrell's Mammoth Solar project in Pulaski and Starke Counties is one of the clearest examples. It is a 1,600 megawatt solar build. The first 480 megawatts came online in July of 2024. Phases 2 and 3, about 900 megawatts combined in Pulaski County, are financed at roughly $1.5 billion under construction now, with completion targeting late 2026 or early 2027. Bechtel has full notice to proceed, and local governments in Pulaski and Starke are expecting $1 to $2 million per year, each in additional property tax revenue for the life of the project. And at the same time, NIPSCO is pivoting at Schahfer. While coal units at the Jasper County site are scheduled to retire between 26 and 28, NIPSCO has formed NIPSCO Generation LLC, also known as GenCo, to build about 2,300 megawatts of new natural gas generation and 400 megawatts of battery storage designed to serve, you guessed it, Amazon data centers in northern Indiana. Planning documents show that once data centers are included, NIPSCO's energy needs more than double. Not a good story. That is a huge structural change. Coal fuel is being removed, but gas-fired plants sized for hyperscale AI load are coming in behind it. We'll see how those time horizons actually work out. To watch how fast Mammoth Solar's remaining phases move and how NIPSCO's GenCo projects progress at the Schahfer site, because both add capacity, but with very different profiles and cost structures, and all utility investment gets visited back on the ratepayer. That's how it works. So here's a question for your team. How will a generation mix that leans more on natural gas and large utility scale solar, with growing data center demand layered on top, change our long-term energy cost projections and any sustainability or reporting commitments we've made to our customers? I'll tell you right now, it's going to change your costing for the worse. That's just how it goes. We've seen it from NIPSCO, and we've seen it across the state, so you have to plan ahead. But look, if you're in Duke Energy Indiana territory, Duke's rising profit guidance and capital plans are shorthand for one reality: more infrastructure spending that ultimately shows up in your rates. Duke reported 2025 adjusted earnings per share of $6.31, up about 7% year over year. Management is guiding 2026 adjusted EPS between $6.55 and $6.80, and reaffirming a 5 to 7% growth target through 2030. Nice. The driver is a $103 billion 5-year capital plan across its 6-state footprint, the largest of any regulated utility in the U.S. That spending is aimed at contracted data center load, grid modernization, coal to gas and coal to renewables, transitions, and new generation. Every single dollar of that capital goes back into the rate base, and rate base is where earnings come from. What that means is that you're going to pay for it. For Duke Energy Indiana specifically, the IURC approved new rates in early 2025 that increased annual revenue by about $295.7 million. Customers are seeing an overall average bill increase of roughly 11%, rolled out as about 8% in February 2025, and another 3% we saw in early 2026. Duke had requested roughly $491 million, but the OUCC, the Office of the Utility Consumer Counselor, recommended a lower number, and Duke has already filed a motion for reconsideration, so the story is still moving. And here's a quick aside. This is the game. Utilities go in with a high ask, and they expect for some of that to get taken off in the rate case proceedings, but the inflation of what's required is a very, very real issue in rate case filings. The nuance that matters for you is how data center infrastructure is paid for. Duke's CEO, Harry Sideris, has said publicly that hyperscalers are required to cover their own infrastructure costs. That lines up with Indiana's growth pays for growth approach, where new large users are expected to fund most of the generation and wires built specifically for them. So your rate pressure is coming from grid hardening, transmission costs, and general growth, not from secretly subsidizing Amazon or other cloud players. At least that is what the public narrative says. So watch the outcome of Duke's reconsideration filing and any new rate case that follows, paying particular attention to how commercial tariffs, C&I tariffs, not industrial, C&I, commercial and industrial, the middle tariffs, pay attention to how those are structured versus residential and the massive top end industrial tariffs. So here's a question for your team. Given Duke's 5-year capital plan and the growth pays for growth policy, how accurate are our 3 to 5 year energy cost forecasts by facility? And are we using conservative enough assumptions on future rate increases? My guidance here is assume the worst. The energy cost increase dilemma, in my view, there's no other way except for it to continue, given the way the regulatory processes and utility posture toward cost of service is currently and has historically been oriented. Listen, if you operate in NIPSCO or CenterPoint territory, the federal government's decision to keep Schahfer and Culley online under emergency orders is probably going to be a good thing for power availability and stability. Nationally, coal plant retirements have slowed sharply. In 2024, about 4 gigawatts of coal capacity retired, well below the roughly 9.8 gigawatts per year seen over the previous decade. In 2025, only about 2.6 gigawatts retired, the lowest since 2010, even though operators had initially planned to shut down about 8.5 gigawatts. Several retirements were delayed and some plants canceled closure plans entirely. And this makes sense. We are massively increasing demand on the grid, and we can't simultaneously massively reduce supply. It just does not work that way. A major reason is federal intervention. On December 23rd, 2025, U.S. Department of Energy Secretary Chris Wright issued emergency orders under Section 202C, directing NIPSCO and CenterPoint, along with MISO, to ensure that Schahfer Units 17 and 18 in Wheatfield and Culley Unit 2 in Warrick County remained available to operate beyond their planned December 31, 2025 retirements. And I think that's a good thing. Those orders were extended on March 23rd, 2026, and now run through at least June 21st, 2026. Across the country, DOE emergency orders have paused or delayed at least 4.4 gigawatts of coal retirement. Schahfer's mechanical condition is apparently a concern. Unit 18 has been offline since July 2025 due to a damaged turbine, and NIPSCO has told regulators it could take 6 months or more to restore. Yet, the Department of Energy, I believe rightly, is directing the company to repair and operate these units. Again, we cannot massively increase demand while massively shrinking supply. Analysis prepared for public interest groups estimates that keeping Schahfer online is costing about $174,000 per day, with Culley adding about $21,000 per day. Those costs, of course, do not disappear. NIPSCO has already gone to FERC seeking a MISO tariff mechanism to spread Schahfer costs across the MISO and North Central regions. Attorneys general in Minnesota and Illinois have filed legal challenges arguing that DOE overstepped by declaring an emergency where grid operators and state regulators had already planned for adequate resources. If the court sides with them, the orders could be vacated and the plants allowed to retire on a shorter timeline. If not, extension beyond 2026 is very possible. And I'll tell you, I have seen the supply and demand balance projections from NIPSCO in particular, and I see no evidence that retiring those units is justified. In fact, what I've seen is nearly a 4,000 megawatt planned deficit. And so, again, we can't retire lots of generation while massively enhancing the need for its supply. What I'd watch for is both the DC Circuit case and any FERC decisions on cost allocation, because together they decide how much of that daily Schahfer and Culley tab will land on commercial customers. Again, industrial customers typically avoid the large increases in cost allocations, and residential customers typically have very good advocacy and advantage when it comes to cost allocation, cost recovery, and cost of service. And you can just look inside the actual numbers from rate cases if you'd like to. Questions for your team. What is your current financial exposure to the extended operation of coal plants like Schahfer and Culley through our NIPSCO and Centerpoint tariffs? And how are we building that potential cost into our forward energy budget scenarios? You have to know how the costs are going to hit your bills. So today you are operating in an Indiana power system where coal's share has fallen into the low 40s. Natural gas and larger solar projects are ramping up. Duke is executing $103 billion in capital expenditure, and federal emergency orders are keeping coal plants in Wheatfield and Warrick County online at potentially six-figure daily costs. NIPSCO is replacing coal at Schahfer with a 2,300 megawatt gas build tied to Amazon data centers. Mammoth Solar is bringing more than a gigawatt and a half of new solar into Pulaski and Starke counties. Duke's latest rate case has already raised bills around 11%, with more capital on the way, and DOE's Section 202C orders have turned coal retirements into a worthwhile legal fight. The bottom line today is this: Indiana manufacturers need to stop thinking of the grid as a slow, one directional coal to renewables story and start planning for a more complicated reality where gas plants, data centers, large solar, aggressive utility capital plans, and federal emergency orders all interact to set your power costs and reliability over the next 3 to 5 years. And I will say, even though this is a tumultuous situation, we have to preserve and extend our capacity, not reduce capacity as demand ramps up. I will not leave that mantle, and I'll repeat it over and over again. But look, obviously, I don't run your plant. You do that. My real job as CEO of Tactical Energy Group is to stay on top of everything that changes the cost and reliability of your power and the economics of making things here in Indiana, so we can build the right products and programs to support the manufacturing community. But while I'm doing that work anyway, this brief is my way of giving you as much of that insight as I possibly can so you can spend more time running your operation and less time trying to decode bills and understand rate cases and interpret the headlines. So, look, I'm going to give you a few questions you can take back into your morning huddle, discuss it with your finance, operations, management, maintenance teams, whatever you have to do. If your team can answer these with specific answers instead of guesses and generalities, you'll have a clearer view of where you're exposed and where you may have some leverage. So the first question is this: given the rapid changes in Indiana's generation mix from coal toward natural gas and large-scale solar and the surge in data center demand, what are our most critical vulnerabilities or opportunities around energy supply stability and cost over the next 3 to 5 years? And if you need any help answering those questions, I'd be happy to help. Just send me a message. Second, how are we assessing the financial impact on our operation of federal interventions like the DOE's emergency orders at Schahfer and Culley versus utility-driven capital investments from NIPSCO and Duke? And how might those different drivers show up differently in our energy budget? The third question is this: what specific actions can we take this year to optimize our energy procurement and consumption strategies, whether it's on-site generation, demand response, or contract structures? And that's to blunt rising costs from poor grid management processes and decisions, and the back and forth about trying to reduce supply while also matching it with an increase in demand. How can we own our own energy supply chain management and start to insulate ourselves from some of the decisions that do not benefit us that are being made by others who have owned and operated the grid for so long. So listen, if this helped you see Indiana's changing energy mix and coal decisions through the lens of your own facility instead of just kind of another headline, then send it to another Indiana operator who needs to be planning ahead on power, not just reacting when the next rate case hits. Hey, I'm Daniel Burke. This is TEG Daily Indiana Manufacturing News, and I will see you tomorrow.